G'day guys, welcome to another episode of the Pumped on Property Show. Now today I'm literally pumped about what we're going to talk about in today's episode, which is probably one of the biggest questions on investors around Australia's minds at the moment.
Which is where are property prices going in 2024? And what we do is we dive into all the data, we dive into everything that people are saying at the moment and give you some context as to why we believe property prices should continue to rise throughout the year.
This little potty, guys, is stacked with some absolute gold, even if we do say so ourselves. And we do go through a couple of different little segments which are new to the show as well, including our gold nugget of the week, our positive news of the week, and our lesson of the week as well, which is a little bit of a new thing towards the back end of the potty. We hope you guys enjoy this one. Let's get into it.
Okay.
Beautiful, bro. So we're back at it today. Different animal this time. We got Snowy, my semi-feral cat, on the couch today.
It is turned into a bit of a zoo in this podcast studio, but I love it. It brings it down to a nice chill vibe.
The last 3 weeks I've literally had the dog, and then I had Cove last week, and now we've got Snowy this week. So it's all happening.
How's puppy life? How's raising a little puppy in this beautiful, beautiful home?
I don't like it, man. I don't like it, eh? Because I got my last dog and he was 7-month-old, fully trained Labrador. And now I've got a spaniel, like a Cocker Spaniel, that is just honestly so beautiful, but doing my head in. Like I wake up in the morning just getting licked in the mouth and then he's pissing everywhere and my whole house smells like piss. And I'm just like, I'm loving it because he's so cute, but I'm also just like, fast forward 3 months on this dog for me, eh?
For those that don't know, Benny's a massive clean freak. To the point where, like, when we were growing up, we used to have this, like, remember the checkered rug? Yes. And it's like if the feet on the dining table or the coffee table weren't perfectly straight, right. You'd always have to move it. And me and the siblings would always just, like, sneakily move it and then watch your little twitch go, what's going on?
With our mum, like, she was a cleaner. And I've just found out in recent years that sometimes she was so anxious that she'd wake up at 2 a.m. and clean our house at night.
Of course, eh?
And so I think I just like inherited her OCD tendencies, hey? And I'm like, I'm doing my best with 2 animals, an acreage property, and also like 3 young kids. But like, fuck, I just like a clean space, clean mind.
Get me back to this caravan that's just easy to maintain and tidy, eh?
You know what the funny thing was? In the caravan, I fully let it go. And same here, like I've let it go.
Of
but
course.
I'm smelling piss, eh? And I don't like it.
Oh, man, like it's so funny. When we got Malibu, our little half spaniel, half poodle, she, we just renovated the house and we put in these brand new carpets and we get this dog and then just like 2 weeks into it, it smells like piss throughout the bedroom. Then we had to like replace it obviously because I just hated the smell. It's just, you can't get rid of it because it seeps through the carpet. Then it gets into like the foam underneath. And so once you're in the foam, you're done, eh? But then we replaced it and the little shit ended up doing it again. And we're like, are you kidding me, Malibu? You're way too old and good for that. But, you know, puppies will be puppies. They're so cute to just come home and love and they give you the biggest kisses and cuddles.
He's very, very beautiful. But yeah, I mean, like it's a love-hate at the moment. And I don't mean to say that and sound like a callous prick, but I'm just like, he walked into the brand new podcast studio this morning. He's been outside for like 10 minutes before that. Walks straight in and tries to wee on the rug and I'm just like, dude.
You've got like a half an acre out there of grass and then he chooses to come into the nice rug. But
I don't blame him, mate. It feels pretty nice, this rug.
That's dogs. Now, you went up to Noosa recently to catch up with some of the Entourage boys from Sydney and had a really good little seminar up there.
Yeah, so the Entourage is pretty much the number one business coaching joint in Australia. Like you and I know Jack, the founder, and Morello, like 2 of the boys, and then one of our other mates, Percy's like part owner in the business too. So I was just more like, hey, they said they were up, I'll go up. And like every time we go to one of their events, we're just learning so much.
They're geniuses.
And so it was a really cool day. It was all about AI, learn how to use ChatGPT, is it? What is it called?
Can you tell where you're at with it? ChatGPT.
Yeah, I know how to use it. I don't know how to say it.
That's classic. It's so interesting when you start playing with it, isn't it?
It was actually really cool. And it was a good day. Like they talked about business operations, strategy, marketing and all that fun stuff, which we love as well. and just got some really cool ideas on like how to make the podcast better, how to make more content that actually connects with you guys out there listening too. So hopefully you should start to see a positive improvement from us.
It'll be interesting to see what AI does to the world. Like, I think we're coming into like 5 years of some pretty dramatic and big changes because of this artificial intelligence revolution. But like, I'm such an old soul at heart. I'm kind of like, damn, like I don't want it to change that much, but it's going to.
I just really don't care. It's kind of like going from whale blubber to like oil. It's kind of going from horse and cars to trains to boats. Like it's just the inevitability of the human brain fixing things and changing things for the better. And I suppose the position that Simon and I have taken is like, we just want to talk to a very small number of people that are like us, that share the same values, that want to change their lives for the better in the future and get financial peace, financial freedom, choices, security down the line. And a big part of like what I learned there on the day was just sort of how easy it is when you consistently step towards like your 15-year goal or your 15-year plan.
Yeah, it's so important. Like one of the things that you mentioned is to have that North Star, to have that like guiding force, something that's pulling you forward, that's bigger than you. And it's like so important to have that vision for the future and ideas to where it should have, and like bring it back to that more human approach, because even with all these changes, it's like, you know, it's still a human being on the other end that's making these decisions, that's trying to better their life for themselves and their family as well.
Without a doubt. Like actually, before we get into the question of the week, which is an absolute cracker this week.
Oh yeah.
You know, what is your North Star at the moment? Like your stage of life is changing. You've got a bub on the way. Like where do you see yourself in 5 years, 10 years from today? Like, and how has that changed in the last few years now?
Look, for me, it's all about family for the next 5 to 10 years. So, you know, you're only going to have little kids once, and like little babies, little squishy, cute little babies. And then
unless you're mum and dad and you have little kids and then
have little kids again.
You do it twice.
I probably won't do that. If I have the choice, I'll probably get the snip if I have a boy than a girl. But we'll wait and see. But yeah, for me, like my North Star is my wife and my child, my unborn child that's soon to be here as well. Like I just want to like be the best dad that I can, be the best husband that I can, you know, support them, provide for them, make sure that I am that safety net, that rock in the family that can be relied upon, that can be trusted, that can be loved, and just, yeah, really focus on family time, because the last sort of 5 to 10 years has been a lot about like personal development, education, investing, business, setting myself up. And, you know, it's been so fun, but like now I'm completely maxed out for servicing. I know property is a long-term game. I've just got to now let time do its thing and just take it easy on that. And I've got some fun projects that we'll talk about in future episodes that are going to be really cool. So there's still other things going on in the back there, but my North Star is definitely my like little boy that's coming, my wife, and just like making sure that I'm being the person that they deserve.
I love that. Like, why don't we actually do that next week? Like, why don't we talk about the projects you've got coming up, the things that I've got coming up, and our plans for the next 5 to 10 years in terms of our investment portfolios and how we're running them, just so that people can get like that insight and behind the scenes of what's really going on.
Yeah, but what about you? Like, what's your driving force? What's your North Star at the moment now that you're back and into a normal routine again?
It seems to be like I'm becoming a semi-professional taxi driver. So I'm really working on that at the moment. I'm just like driving my kids to like aerial tutoring, aerial netball, soccer, tutoring, like family, birthday, family. Per week? Like an 8.
Every day.
Every day, man.
Twice a day.
Every day I'm hustling. What is it? Shuffling. Driving. No, so that's me. I'm working towards being a better driver for sure. But outside of that, I think for me it's become really clear, man, like absolute family. Now that I'm getting closer to 40, like I'm 39 this year, health is really, really important to me. So my North Star health-wise is over the next 3 to 5 years to be moving better than I do today, with mobility and yoga, strength as well, like just really enjoying that journey. From our client perspective, we've both committed to taking on less people moving forward, but taking on people that are like us, that like really care about what they're doing, and that, might be struggling with some analysis paralysis at the moment or a bit of frustration, or they might be a bit time poor, but they're like the same as you and I, like looking to carve out time to set themselves up longer term. So for me, like helping people is a big part of it. We're doing the charity thing at the moment, but like in terms of the contribution through the business, like really working with that sort of stuff. And then like travel as well, man. Like I want to go to Europe next year with the family.
Amazing.
The year after, definitely going to do the Soccer World Cup in America. Definitely keep the caravan thing going as well. So yeah, like just living a full balanced life. And I was watching the Bon Jovi doco. There's like a new 4-part doco that just came out. The most charismatic dude when he was young of all time. Like no one's close.
Comes across in his video clips. What was that?
Makes Leo DiCaprio look like just chill. Like,
I have to watch it. I used to love, what is that famous song that they had? It's My Life or whatever.
It's My Life.
Yeah. Oh
so
man,
good.
that used to G me up so much.
Yeah, I've been actually driving to the beach this morning to meet you. I was listening to it. It's such a vibe.
And then you get down the beach and it's a half a foot.
Yeah, it's like, oh shit, what have I done? I'm like, I want to go to Margaret again.
I love that film clip, hey. Such a sick film clip. Go Bon Jovi.
Yeah, but he was just super inspiring, and he talked about, like, I could see that transition in him once he got enough for himself, that it wasn't about him anymore. It was about helping his team, helping his community, helping the people that he works with, and just putting on a fucking good show. And that's what, like, not that we put on a show, but I want to provide the best educational content in the Australian property industry. So that's sort of like the North Star at the moment.
I love it. Well, let's get into it. Question of the week.
Question of this week was a real good one.
Did I have to double check?
Yeah, I'm just sitting here and I'm like, what was the question?
The question of the week was, where could property prices go? Where are property prices heading in 2024?
Yeah, sorry guys.
So, we've got a whole bunch of different things that we want to talk about, just touch on little bits and pieces, maybe go deeper on some others. But like first things first is like the predictions that are coming out from everyone, really.
Well, like if I could just say one thing first, because we've got like 16 crazy predictions and things we wanted to talk about today, but it's really like where this is coming from. And it's like we said in the last couple of episodes, like there's this disconnect between almost every asset class in the world going off at the moment and then monster amounts of fear and uncertainty. Like a lot of people are feeling scared. A lot of people aren't sure what's coming next. A lot of people have been waiting for years and years and years for things to feel good, either post-COVID or post-interest rate rises. And like there's just this general uncertainty, especially for people without like a clear plan and vision on how they're going to get to where they want to be, as to like, I don't know what's coming next, so I'm just going to sort of bury my head in the sand and just wait. And the only problem with that is, like you said to me before this off camera, like Perth went up 2% this month. Brisbane went up over probably 1%.
It was like 0.9% last month, so basically another percent.
Yeah, which is big money to be missing out on. Like on $1 million, 2%'s $20K.
Exactly.
And if you miss that,
in 1 month.
If you miss Perth this year, that's 20% growth that you miss. That's $200,000 we're talking about here. It's
always been like this as well. We've been doing this for 9 years, give or take a couple of months. Yep. And, that's always been the sentiment. Like, yeah, sentiment readings are a little bit lower at the moment, but still there's always this little bit of fear, a little bit of uncertainty, because let's be honest, nobody can predict the future. We can say what these guys are predicting, but nobody truly knows. And like, that's why I think it's important to have that North Star and to have that like guiding force and to have that longer term approach rather than, fixating on the short term. And, it's a roll of the dice at the end of the day where things are actually going to head short term, but long term, based on everything that we're going to talk about today, you can see that, property is hopefully going to continue heading in a great direction.
And like a great guiding North Star for every investor listening to this is probably just starting with replacing 100K per year of passive income.
Yep.
And you can go back and listen to the 2 or 3 Properties to Financial Freedom strategies on YouTube, our Instagram, or the podcast episodes where we like break down those 3 steps. But that should be the starting point. And then if you're earning more than 100K, then replacing your salary or your partner's salary. And then once you've got that financial piece locked in, then it's about starting to do what you really enjoy doing and helping other people get up there as well. Like each one, teach one, like that Denzel Washington, like pull the next generation or people around you up at the same time.
I love that though. You got to start somewhere. And, I talk to a lot of people that are like, I want to buy 10 properties in the next 10 years. I want to, replace $300,000 worth of passive income. And I think that's awesome, but it is a massive goal. And it's like if you're starting with nothing, or if you're starting with maybe your own home or just one investment property, take the pressure off. Make it an easy step over target. And then the Jim Rohn thing that we've talked about a billion times, like don't become a millionaire to be a millionaire. Become a millionaire for the person that you have to be a millionaire.
Become a millionaire, he should have said, to be fully broken and then to have to rebuild yourself out of it, because that's what it is. It's grit and it's fucking hard. Like it's not easy to do it.
And I was talking to a client that we'd been working with for quite some time. We bought his first property back in 2018. And he's done 3 dual income properties with us up here in Brisbane. His goal was to replace 150K worth of passive income. But now in 2024, like he initially went for that for more of a cash flow play. And the capital growth has far exceeded his initial expectations.
The property's doubled since he bought it.
A little bit less, but close to. And he's there sitting and he's like, I'm not too sure what to do next. Like, I've sort of done what I needed to do, but I don't feel as though it's enough anymore. And I'm like, that's awesome. Like, let's workshop that. Let's talk about that. And I'm like, well, the beautiful thing is because of the smart decisions that you've made and the sacrifices that you've made to do this, you now have choices. Like, you can leverage off this equity and continue buying properties if you want more in the future. If you want to look at some different unique strategies, like going up a bit of a level and maybe looking at some shorter term deals, you can entertain that. And he's like, I was looking into some commercial stuff, and I'm like, just giving him some education on that side of things as well. And at the end of the call, he was just so grateful and motivated because he's like, I started investing in property for choices and for freedom. And he's like, I've already got that, but it happened so much sooner than I was expecting. So it's like, you just got to start somewhere and know that off the back of it, you'll have choices. Off the back of it, you'll have options. And you've changed your portfolio completely once in the past, and you may in the future, we don't know. Yeah. Probably not, but you may. And it's like, it's okay to do it. But once you're in, you've got those choices. You've got that freedom.
I think that concept of the North Star that we picked up this week with the Entourage boys is really important, because my North Star as an investor is passive income for life. Without sacrificing long-term capital growth, very, very low maintenance properties that don't stress me out, really good tax benefits as well, and timing. Like, I like to buy the right market at the right time. And, there's some suburbs in Brisbane, like we talked about before, that have doubled, almost tripled in value in 10 years. And there's others not that far away from those that have done 50, 60% in the same time, 70%. So if you know how to find the needle in the haystack, there's plenty of needles out there still. One of the most common things I'm hearing at the moment from people, which is like been a pain point, is, have I missed the boat? Like, I'm hearing that almost every day. And I'm like, you've definitely missed the boat if you're trying to buy within 5Ks of the CBD of Brisbane. You've most likely, like all of our clients have pretty much doubled their money within 5 to sort of 10Ks. But then outside of that, there's some suburbs that have absolutely cranked. Yeah. Like Woodridge, which was arguably the worst suburb in Queensland, we were buying for 300K 5 years ago, is now worth 700K. And then you've got like a suburb near that over the same period of time has only gone from like 550 to 700K. So the jump relative to each other hasn't been equal. And that's why when you understand like short-term patterns versus long-term history, you can really give yourself a higher chance of picking winners sooner and easier.
And this has always happened in growth cycles. It happened in Sydney, it happened in Melbourne, it happened in Canberra, it happened in Hobart, Tasmania, it's happening in Brisbane, it's happening in Perth, it's happening in Adelaide. Like that study that Jeremy Shepherd did over 20 years looking at capital growth levels, and areas and suburbs that perform great in the first 10 years typically underperform in the following 10. And then areas that underperformed in the first 10 typically outperform in the next 10. So, that's just how it works. The ripple effect is real, and you can use that to your advantage. And you just got to understand how to analyze those suburbs and how to look at that short-term reality versus the long-term trends, and then hotspot and pick the best suburb that's there right now.
I forgot that, I just haven't talked about it with you for a couple of years, but I forgot how powerful that was when we figured that out. Now I know how he and other people like us pick that, those underperforming suburbs, and because I've figured out how to pick it, it's much easier just looking at one number.
Yeah.
But I forgot how important that is when you're like making the decision, because we might, recently I was like, I'm interested in looking at Townsville. Well, we looked at every suburb in Townsville across 7 or 8 indicators, and we knew where it was at, and we did the same thing. Like, I unfortunately got your wife Tay to look at 300 suburbs for me in Perth this year, or late last year, and we did the same thing recently in Brisbane. And it's like, when you aggregate the data and know what you're looking for, like, there are holes in all 3 of those markets right now that look so special, like suburbs that are 50% below where they could be based on other suburbs around them. So that's it gets me fucking excited, to be honest with you. I love that stuff.
Yeah, well, I'm bullish for 2024 as well. Like, it's already shaping up to be a great year. We're looking at the Australian average up like, oh gosh, I can't remember exactly the figure that we wrote down, but Australia, like most capital cities, are moving forward at the moment outside of like Canberra really. And like everything is shaping up to be in alignment with what like SQM and what some of these guys were predicting at the start of the year. So let's jump into some of these notes.
Yeah, like one of the predictions that we talked about in the previous podcast was something in the Financial Review from Oxford Economics.
Yeah.
And they were expecting the average capital city between now and 2027, like mid-2027, which is only 3 years away, to do between 13 to 30%.
Yeah.
Brisbane looked epic, Adelaide looked great, Perth looked great as well from that perspective. And then I go, well, how do I make a decision between those 3 markets? For me, I'm an East Coaster all the way because of the diversification and population growth, and the fact that 500,000 people don't leave the state when the commodities boom ends, like last cycle. But there's great value in those other markets as well. And I've just spent time in Adelaide and Perth to go check them out with my family while I was traveling around Australia. And for all of us East Coasters, like I grew up in Sydney, I've spent a lot of time in Brisbane now, I've been to Melbourne heaps. You overvalue how much better you think the East Coast is relative, but Adelaide and Perth are fucking livable, functional cities with great incomes and beautiful houses. Like, they're cool spots with great upside potential.
I was watching this like Australian history documentary on YouTube the other day that was looking at like the colonisation of the 5 big cities, like Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth. And it's like, the funny thing is, like, Adelaide and Perth got colonised before Melbourne did. So it's like, these places have been around for a long time and they're going to be here for a long time more. It's just like, the reality is over 75% of the Australian population live in Melbourne, Sydney and southeast Queensland.
Which means 75% of Australia's future income growth is going to be there, future population growth is going to be there, and infrastructure growth is going to be there. And that's why it's only 2.5 hours between them, really. And once they get the fast...
Oh, bro, it's going to be game changer.
And so it's just factoring in those things. Like, if between Brisbane or the sunny coast and Geelong ends up being 25, 30 million people over time, that's a significant upside for property, because it's going to bring in... Well, we're already sucking all the money out of Asia right now anyway, because they're like running out of that market. So it's stable here, and then we've got commodities under the ground with a great government, but we could go into that forever. Like, I suppose the next thing is, a bunch of years ago when I was trying to figure this stuff out, we found that 46 years of homely data between 1976 and 2016. Mm-hmm. And me being a geek, and Simon getting dragged along for my ride, but we sat down and had a bit of fun with it, and me, you and Adzi basically cut the data with Ryan from On Property. And what we found is that when a market, because some markets in Australia, in fact 3, Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth, have all done what almost more than 15% in the last 12 months, roughly.
Adelaide not quite there, but Brisbane and Perth, yeah.
Close. So what we found is that when we looked at the data over that 46-year, 50-year period now, when a market got a 10% growth year, the likelihood of the year after that being another double-digit growth year was significant statistically. Like actually 65% of the time, we'll see another 10% growth year the year after we get one.
Give me those odds any day of the week.
The reason why, it's actually the only, I used to call this like the silver bullet because it's really the only statistically significant thing outside of 10-year growth rates to predict short-term performance in a market.
And it comes back to like the challenge or the question that so many people have, like, have I missed a boat? And it's like, well, properties have gone up a fair bit over the last 12 months, but it's like, based on that indication, there could be a 65% chance that these cities are going to see another double-digit growth year, and all three of them are shaping up to do that this year as well.
Without a doubt. So, that's something that I like, that we don't talk about this stuff with non-clients too much. Like this isn't the stuff we normally share through potties and that because it's deep info, but these are the way that we're cutting the market. And when we're thinking about where to invest, we're always looking at this stuff. And rolling back up a level, like the average house price in Brisbane at the moment is $880K according to Oxford Economics, should be 1.2 by the middle of 2027, which is a $320,000 gain.
Yeah.
Perth is expected and Adelaide's expected to go to $1.1 million by then. Now, I'm not sure where their average is sitting up now, but I'm assuming it's $200,000 to $300,000 better off by then, according to these analysts. So that's big upside. Like, think about how much after-tax dollars you need to save in the next 3 years to save $300,000 cash. Like, if your property goes up by $300K, like that's theoretically what you're doing. It's crazy.
It is so crazy. And like that was a pretty bullish prediction. And, it seems to be the most likely outcome at the moment. Like when I was looking at the data from SQM, they were sort of indicating that the national average will be between -1% and 3% this year. Yep. And, there was obviously winners and losers in there. The winners were really Brisbane, Perth and Adelaide. All expected to go up by, low single digits to high single digits. And, looking at where we're at in May, like, the national average is already up 2%. So like, the -1% is sort of out the window now. And then, Brisbane, Perth, Adelaide are all tracking in front of where they should be based on their based on their annual average as well. So, SQM was they look at multiple different scenarios, and their most likely scenario was looking at those types of returns, and it appears as though things are beating that at the moment.
And when we did a video recently on 50 years of house prices versus interest rates versus inflation, and, gold in particular, as well as property, seem to be two places that investors historically, when there's periods of higher inflation, park their money. And so this is just a natural move because property prices generally outpace inflation. In fact, if inflation in the last year was like 4 or 5%, whatever you want to aggregate it at, and house prices in Brisbane did 16%, like you outpriced inflation 3 times over. So I think it's important to recognize that at different stages of the cycle, like it doesn't look like they're going to get inflation under control in the way that they hope to. Like it might be years and years away before we see 2% global inflation levels again. And, just riding that wave, understanding where value is. Like what's the point of putting getting 5% in the bank right now if inflation's 5%? What's the point of getting 7 or 8% in the stock market if 5%'s ripped out of it? So I think about all those things as well.
Yeah, exactly. And to look at some of the other reasons why property prices should rise in 2024, it's like we have a clear supply issue right now. There's less properties being sold and put on the market on average compared to the past. We're seeing record low vacancy rates, and that's been the case for over 3 years now. So that's not changing. And it's like you think about those things, those supply issues aren't likely to go anywhere soon unless they drop interest rates and incentivize private investors to bring more supply to the market. Yeah. So it's like we're at this pain point where it's like, they don't want to reduce interest rates because they want inflation to cool down, but then they sort of need to get private investors bringing more properties to the market, whether it be high-rise apartments, new suburbs, house and land packages, changing town plans and allowing people to add more properties to like a block of land. So, those supply issues aren't going anywhere, and that obviously leads to the vacancy rates being extremely low, rental returns going up with people that are in rental properties. If they can't get a rental and they're in a good situation and maybe they wanted to rent where they wanted to live, but now they can't get a rental, they're forced to buy. So then there becomes more buyers and obviously less supply once again.
And like many people that I know with 10, 20% cash deposits that are buying at the moment can buy in a lot of these areas with that cash deposit and go interest only on their loan and be paying equal to or less than what you'd pay in rent right now, which is what we saw leading into the last GFC as well. So it's like, it's just interesting. Like on top of those things that you just mentioned, there's some crazy things I've been hearing through the grapevine. So Clay, one of our clients, he just signed up for his second and third, but he's like the top broker basically Australia-wide now in the Aussie Home Loans Network, or one of the top brokers. And he was saying to me that there's, some stuff coming through from the government around the first home buyers, but there's also some stuff where there's going to be these government-backed loans where the government guarantees the bank loan effectively, like a mum and dad guaranteeing like a first-time investor or home buyer's loan. And the government might kick in the 30% deposit for that investor or for that home buyer, depending on how they do it.
Of the deposit, I think it was.
Yeah, like I haven't gone into the specifics, and I think in a future episode we'll get our head around it and bring it to you guys early.
Maybe we'll get Clay on in.
Clay's going to come in too and talk about it, but it's just a big thing. Like knowing that sort of stuff's coming down the line is positive. On top of the massive tax rates that we talked about in last week's podcast a little bit. And, the income growth as well as the infrastructure growth going on at the moment, like it's unprecedented basically since the last GFC, and it's really, really positive stuff.
Yeah, super low unemployment rates, and then heaps of immigration as well. So like I was talking to a couple of like big business owners, like these guys are running like $100 million per year businesses. And I'm like, how are you finding? And they're like, we just can't get good staff.
Yeah.
We can't get access to good staff. Like the unemployment rate is being driven mostly by unskilled workers and not the skilled workers. Like skilled workers have options at the moment. And then a lot of these international immigrants that are coming into the country are going out and getting 6-figure plus jobs, which is just insane. So they've got disposable income. They've got income to service loans. They've got income to pay for rent or buy property.
If they get visas and decide to stay here, immigrants don't rent long-term. Immigrants buy houses.
Especially Indians and Chinese, like they get into the market as soon as they possibly can because they know the history. They've studied it.
Exactly. So I think that's some cool stuff. I suppose on top of that, people like Simon Presley and Phil Anderson have had some really positive stuff to say. I highly recommend checking out Simon Presley's over there at Propertyology's blog. Got some incredible blogs to read if you're into reading. If you're into listening to stuff, then Phil Anderson's Property Share Market Economics has got some great videos and tutorials and information, like emails coming out at the moment too. Like generally what I'm finding from both of them is like they're completely against the media's grain right now, and that's the consistent thing. They are basically in this place where it's like, yes, there's like hard real stuff going on at the moment for many people, many households with interest rates being so high, but there's a whole story that's not being told at the moment well, and because of that they're extremely bullish, particularly on the next couple of years. So I think all in all, from everything that we've been looking at, and these are like 16 out of 100 things that we're thinking about at the moment, is things look bloody good for 2024, and I think the year will end up in most capital cities looking very, very positive.
And like to come back to Phil and Akhil's stuff, like they talk on a global, more macro level, but when they would ask questions specifically about Australia, they were like extra bullish on Australia because of the supply issues, because of the international population growth, but mostly because of the infrastructure boom, which is causing a commodities boom. And we have so many natural resources and such a good government and such good tax incentives for these big mining companies that like they are so bullish on good quality locations around Australia that still have those fundamentals, good population growth, good infrastructure growth, good income growth, has underperformed relative to the history, has good incomes and rental returns where your tenants are paying for the majority of your holding costs on that property. And, you know, they were sort of saying, if you know where those locations are, like, you know, there is some ridiculous gains coming over the next couple of years. They're still calling the biggest real estate boom that has been seen.
Yeah, wow. You know, again, like we'll see where all the dust settles. That's the great thing with retrospect. Like Simon, Phil's, the other Simon, like CoreLogic, Commonwealth Bank, none of these guys can accurately predict the future. They can just use data to make decisions for the short term. But the one thing about all of us is we all make longer term decisions. So
That's right.
I was talking to some people yesterday, just signed up, Callum, ex-professional triathlete that runs like a really cool little business now on the coast. And he was basically saying, you know, when you think about it, property prices don't really go backwards, do they? And I'm like, well, actually, bro, I don't mean to pop your bubble. Like you've just signed up. But in the last 7 years, Simon and I saw house prices go back 10 to 15% last year in 2020, late 2022, 2023. For a period of the year, it looked really horrible. In COVID, we were getting places like, what, in some instances, 10, 20, 30% below what they were worth a year before.
Queensland, let alone Sydney.
Yeah, like in Sydney, I know clients that bought houses in COVID in the Shire for 1.2 mil that were worth 2 before COVID, and they've just like now got valuations at 3.5 again.
Yeah.
And then the same thing when they made it really hard to borrow money, APRA in 17, 18, I saw house prices Australia-wide drop 15%. And I said, it's a beautiful story if you're looking at 15 to 20 years. And it's a really bumpy one if you're going through it year to year. But like the thing is, we're not stock traders. It really doesn't matter where your property's sitting outside of the cash flow until you're ready to sell it. And so if you understand timing a little bit and you can buy closer to the bottom and middles of cycles versus at the very, very bubbly top, like people are in a bit of pain in Tassie right now because all of Australia speculated on this tiny little market, and it was investment driven, mum and dad driven, people moving like to Tassie, COVID driven. And now it's like, cool, like it did almost 100% growth in 5 years and it pulled back a fair bit last year. And it's like, it's good to know that like maybe that's not the option right now. Maybe you're looking at somewhere else that looks more like that did 3-4 years ago.
And this is why you've got to look at your individual situation as an investor as well. Like not just buy property because you want to buy a property, but like buy a property because it aligns with your short, medium and long-term goals. You know, like for everyone, they might be tapped out at the moment like me. Like I'd love to be getting into more assets right now, but I'm like fully maxed out and it'd be like super risky for me with the current interest rates to get into more debt. But then you have people that have smaller portfolios that are just at the beginning of their journey that are wanting to you know, start generating some capital gains and building a property portfolio. So it's always based on your individual situation. And like, that's why it's important to have, you know, an awesome mortgage broker, accountant, buyer's agent or financial advisor that you can talk with and bounce ideas off and look at your individual situation and go, what is the best decision for me right now? Like, what should I be doing short term?
I love that. So segueing into one of the little segments we do each week now, which I actually get excited about,
Me too.
is the gold nugget of the week. So let's talk about Brisbane according to CoreLogic in the last 30 years.
So 1992, great year, once again, the year of the monkey, the year I was born, through to 2022. I love that the study started then. It was looking at Brisbane house prices, and the average house in Brisbane went up 340%, so over 100% a decade over that period of time. And obviously since 2022, it's gone up another maybe 15 to 20% as well. So you're looking at, you know, maybe closer to 360% since 1992 now in Brisbane house prices, which is just life-changing. You know, you buy one property in 1992 at the age of, say, 30 or 40 even, and then now you're 60 or 70, that property's worth 360% more. Like, that's surely better than what the average managed super fund has done over the same period of time.
Yeah, like property in Australia, as we said last week, according to Simon Priestley, has, averaged 8.2% a year for 50 years. So it's done extremely well, like one of the highest performing assets in the world over that period of time, which sort of takes us into some positive news for this week. Now, this is news that I got a little while ago, from the homely stuff, but I wanted to bring it to people because most people aren't looking back as far as we have. So basically, when I looked at the period between 1997 and 2003 in Sydney, now that also was the second stage of the real estate cycle, which is notoriously a good stage for growth in different markets. But house prices leading into, the 3 years leading into and the 3 years after the Olympics went up 97% in Sydney. Now, with an Olympic Games coming into Brisbane in 2032, that's just an important piece of positive news for investors out there. Again, another reason, if you're in that, oh my gosh, there's so many markets in Australia and it's overwhelming mode, like so many people are, or even more common at the moment is Brisbane versus Adelaide versus Perth versus some eccentric regional town that I've never heard of, and I'd say no to the little town. There's just a compelling reason to really wrap your head around Brisbane to me because of what I've seen in Sydney in the past.
And what I liked about that as well, that was the Sydney average, because a lot of people ask me about, yes, Brisbane's hosting the Olympics, but where is going to be the best suburb to invest in? Like, should I be investing in like Wollongabba, where they know most of the games are going to be held? And I'm like, well, looking at this data, this was Sydney on average. So the rising tide lifted all ships. And, when you look at Sydney, like, you're probably better off looking at a house a little bit further from Sydney Olympic Park rather than going for an apartment in Sydney Olympic Park, because they oversupplied that market just for the Olympic Games.
They're doing the Gabba and Hilton now, right?
Exactly. So that's what I was going to get at. So they're already in the process and in the pipeline of, creating far more supply than is necessary in those suburbs for the Olympic Games. But the fundamentals don't change. You still should be going for land. You still should be going for houses. And that means you can look at areas that are a little bit further removed, maybe 10, 15 or 20 kilometres away from where the games will be held. And, hopefully history repeats and the rising tide lifts all ships again.
The new thing that we wanted to add in as like a third little segment into the podcast, which you haven't done in the last few episodes, is kind of this concept of the lesson of the week. And pretty soon we're going to be launching our property school, which is just my loose name for it. I don't know if that's going to stick yet, but that's going to be very, very tactical tips and tricks on how to invest, starting from the idea and why property all the way through to like running your $1 million portfolio like a business. And they're going to be like different shorter format podcasts that we just play around with. But this lesson of the week is kind of like segueing us into that, because we have talked to 7,000 investors now. We've helped buy over 1,000 properties worth over $500 million now. And we're constantly learning, but we've been really, really bad at passing that knowledge on to anyone outside of those few people that we like choose to work with every week.
And a lot of the time we talk about the lessons that we've learned as well. And it's like, we've learned a lot because we get to do this full time. But it's like, of those 7,000 people that we talk to, we've heard so many stories, some amazing success stories that are just so inspiring, and then some really shocking, terrible stories where people have unfortunately been taken advantage of. And it's like, we want the best for everyone. Like, my approach and your approach is we have an abundant mindset. Like, we truly believe there's enough out there for everybody to have what they want, which is why we give so much away for free, because, there is that opportunity for everyone. But there's ways to become a better investor. And like, for me, it's all about the ROI. Like, I want to maximize the percentage return on my investment over the period of time that I hold that, to speed up my journey and to, I guess, positively reinforce the decisions that we've made. So like, the lesson of the week is like, think bigger than your own backyard. So I know you've got a story about this one. So do I, about a friend of mine. Why don't you jump into Dave's story about like thinking bigger than your own backyard?
Yeah, so Dave, more than any other client, probably changed the way that I invested forever. Yeah. So Dave had never earned more than $100,000 in his life as an employee, but he had managed over a 20-year period to buy his own home and almost own it outright in the Hills District of Sydney. And on top of that, he had, I think, 2 or 3 other houses in Sydney that slowly over a 15-year period he'd actually built granny flats on.
It's like one every 5 years. So it's like house first, investment 5 years later, investment 5 years later, investment 5 years later.
And then about, 12 to 15 years ago, they changed the granny flat laws, and slowly over time he added a granny flat. So he ended up with his own home and between 2 to 3 houses with granny flats, so 4 to 6 incomes in Sydney. And when he came to us, we work with ballers like Kim that I'm catching up with later today, just signed up for a 7th property. She wants to do another one and her partner wants to do 2 more. So collectively, these 2 women, Kim and Ann, will have done 10 in 7 to 8 years. And when you've got a business like they had that's earning millions of dollars a year, like balling out's easy. It's just the allocation of capital, right? Mm-hmm. But when someone comes in earning 100K per year and they've almost got 150 grand a year of passive income in their early 50s and their own home that's worth 1.5, 2 million bucks owned outright, and they've had kids and they've just been an employee, like I was like, cool, like let's figure out what's going on here. So when I went and had lunch with him, like he signed up to us even after all of that experience because he didn't know Brisbane. Mm. Sydney was done at that time. Like Sydney had literally doubled since the GFC.
And he couldn't afford to buy there.
He could not afford to buy there. So he had capacity to buy a 400K-ish home with some money to renovate it and then to build a granny flat. So we helped him identify a middle ring suburb with great growth potential that's probably done since he bought it, 50 to 80% growth. It was one of the suburbs that, like the ones we're buying now, was statistically low at that time in North Brisbane. He did a basic cosmetic like facelift on the property and then he built his granny flat, and he'd be getting over $1,000 a week in rent for that property today. And the property's gone from 400K to probably 850 if he sold it now with the granny flat. So Dave's story of like, I can't afford my own backyard, which is so common.
But also just dropping the ego and like also like that, the bias, like the recency bias of like, well, Sydney's worked for me. This has been like a winning formula for me.
I'll just do what's worked again.
Yeah, that so many people fall into that trap. And I talk to, how many people do you talk to? They're young first-time investors. Their parents are successful through property investing. They bought like 2 properties in the 80s and now they're killing it. And, you know, their parents are like, no, you have to invest in your local market.
And they get them like to buy a 1 or 2 bedroom unit and they don't know that they're hamstringing their kids for the next 15 years. It happens all the time, and I'm not saying kids, like 30 and 40-year-olds whose parents are driving the decision. So like that's one example of buying outside your backyard that worked out. But I've also talked to other people, right, where Kieran, like a guy we worked with years and years ago, like he was in Sydney. He could afford Sydney at that time, but he was chasing the short-term mining money last cycle that it was running around. And he bought Mackay and ended up taking a $300,000 loss on that property, dropping his rent from $800 a week to $300 a week, paid $800K for the home, and he literally couldn't sell it for like even $400. So maybe he took like a bigger bath than that. Maybe. And that's an example of, again, like it's not necessarily like where like you have to invest outside of your backyard. Like if your backyard right now is Adelaide, Brisbane, Perth,
go for it.
Perfect. But if you're chasing some sort of short-term return because Perth did 20% growth this year and it looks shiny, versus looking at fundamentals of like, well, what has Perth done versus Brisbane versus Adelaide versus Sydney over the last 100 years or 50 years? It's just important to know that there's pros and cons both way, but investing outside your own backyard if you can't afford it and using fundamentals to find the safest, highest quality market can be incredible, and the opposite is true as well if you don't do the fundamentals and chase the shiny thing.
And I'd like to share a story about that with one of my close friends from Sydney, from the Sutherland Shire. Like, we grew up together, we both lived in the same suburb, both had a very similar upbringing, good family. Like, you know, he was doing really, really well for himself. And like back in sort of just pre-COVID, like 2019-20, he was looking at buying his first property. We were chatting at the time, and, you know, he just couldn't get his head outside of the local market. Like, he couldn't afford to buy anything in the Sutherland Shire. So he was looking down at Wollongong. And at the time, like, he had a $600,000 budget, which like went a long way in 2019 in Wollongong or in Brisbane. So, you know, I was like, look, you should really strongly consider going for a house in Brisbane. You know, it's really doing well. But he was like, nah, like Wollongong's killing it. Remember Wollongong in 2019, it was going off. So he was like, nah, it's really killing it. But he couldn't afford a house. So he sacrificed and bought a 2-bedroom, relatively new apartment in like right in the Wollongong CBD for like low $600,000. And, you know, few years removed, like 2023, I caught up with him at a party, and he's like, oh, I'm thinking of selling the apartment in Wollongong. And I'm like, why that? Why is that? And he just goes, well, you know, it's costing me so much money now with the higher interest rates, and, you know, it's only gone up about $50,000 since I bought it. And, you know, it's just holding me back from being able to do anything else because I don't have the serviceability with like $500,000 worth of debt tied up in this one property. And I'm like, you know, sure, like, let's work on an exit strategy. But I didn't tell him this because like I didn't want to burst his bubble. But I'm like, far out, man. In 2019, if you had have bought a house in Brisbane for $600,000, today it'd be worth over $1 million. Instead of making $50,000 and losing money on cash flow, he would have made over $400,000, and that property would have paid for itself even with the interest rate fluctuations. And it's just like, the opportunity cost lost there for a 30-year-old guy that, you know, wants the best for himself. He's like, just the recency bias, the location bias got the better of him. And, you know, now he's like trying to get into another property and a better property because he's learned from his mistakes, but he's still missed out on a lot of capital gains. So it's like, these are big decisions. And like, the harsh thing is with property investing is everybody in Australia wants to buy a house, if not buys a house. And because everyone's parents, aunties, uncles, friends, colleagues have this experience buying property, everyone thinks that they can do it really well. Mm-hmm. I was talking to this lady yesterday, and it's like, she's a musician, and it's like, I've got a guitar. She could see the guitar in my home office behind the video chat. It's like, oh, you got a guitar? And I'm like, yeah. And we were talking about an analogy. She'd bought a couple of properties herself, and she's like, you know I can do this myself, but she's like, I know I can get more out of this. And I'm like, well, if I want to learn how to properly play that guitar, I'm going to pay a coach. I'm going to pay a teacher to get me better at playing guitar, and I'm going to learn a lot quicker than if I were to try and teach myself or stumble my way through it. And it's like, that's the way you got to think about everything in life, like surrounding yourself with like-minded people that have got more experience at the things that you want to do so that you can avoid making mistakes and just speed this journey up and have that positive reinforcement.
I love that. And, you know, one of the hardest things about what we do is, you know, it's like, you know, working with a personal trainer that's been doing it for 15 years that moves exactly the way that you want to move. And it's like they can see technically where you're at immediately. Or if anyone listening to this has played any sort of competitive sport for a period of 10 years plus, you can see someone who's day one, year 5 versus where you're at now. And it's the same with anyone who's a professional or running their own business. Like, there's just layers to it, and time creates greatness if it's focused in one area. And so it's not that showing up and buying a property, going to the gym, first year on the job, first 5 years in the business is a bad thing. Everyone's got to cut their teeth and start. But it's like, you don't even know what you don't know. Mm-hmm. I didn't know what I'm almost 15 years into it now. And you saw the turn when I went, I know what makes a great suburb and investment decision, But now I know how money moves around the world. I know how cycles work. I know how to leverage expertise off people that are smarter than me. I know how to dice an area properly. I know how to negotiate properly. I know how to negotiate after offer together further discount. Like, I know how the system works to create money out of thin air. And so with that, it's like you can do it like I did over 15 years and figure it out, or you can do it like you did, which was you came in at that perfect time just as we figured out all this stuff together and made the right decisions. And instead of having to do 17 properties like I did and make a lot of mistakes, you did 4 and ended up in an equally as good position longer term, if not better. And so it's exciting to be able to like help 2, maybe 3 people each week that we want to work with that share the same values as us, speed 15 years of their 40.
Yeah.
You know, what you can do is instead of looking at 45 years of work from 20 to 65, with the right strategy, do it in 15. And so it's 30 to 45. And then it's like, well, what could your life look like if you overcome all of the challenges and fears and things that you're going through now, and then big picture, longer term, could create peace in your own future and security in the future, and most importantly, a fucking passive income for life so that you can wake up and do whatever you're here to do, not what someone else is telling you to do. And that gets me excited. Like, that's why I started this thing and I forgot about it for 10 years. And now that's why I'm back. Like, because I love the idea of now that I'm not like the dude that's drowning figuring it out, I'm the dude that's like, hey, I did what I said I was going to do and so are you. How many people can we help up? And unfortunately, as a business, we'll only take on a small number a week, but hopefully for this content, we get to like help people through the content too.
There's so many penny drop moments for people throughout this podcast. If you really deeply listen, like to the fundamentals, the long-term performance, the way that you should market. So another one with heaps of value, hopefully. Well, at least from our opinion.
if Simon does say so himself. No, man, I'm super grateful for another potty. If you guys haven't already done so, please, what was I going to say?
Do what everybody asks you to do. Like, subscribe, share.
Please subscribe. Please give it a like. If you don't follow us on Instagram, our vision with Instagram or mine is to, like, in 1 year, through 15 seconds a day, educate you to become a high quality investor, sort of like wax on, wax off shit in my mind. And it's like, there's just so many little snippets of gold. Fuck, I'm so bad with the chopsticks, eh? But yeah, like kids are asking me to teach them how to do chopsticks at the moment. And I'm like, Harper's telling everyone what to do. And she's like 9.
Yeah, well, she's been eating sushi since she was 2, so no wonder she's so good. Love it, man. Let's wrap it up.
Let's wrap it up.
Woo, that's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Cool, bro. Yeah. Oh, sweaty. So sweaty. Oh, that's good. That's so nice.